Good morning, everyone. My name is Rajesh Patel. On behalf of Ars Vidya Ontario, I welcome you all. And before we start, I request Dr. Terry Papneja, if you can introduce Acharya ji. Dr. Papneja, can you do that honor, please?
Yes. I guess many of us have attended the classes last few months before the summer break with Acharya Navneetji. Acharya Navneetji comes with a unique talent, one of the brightest minds from India. He is a graduate from IIT institution. And he worked few years before joining Swami Dayanand Saraswati under his guidance. He did the courses on Upanishad and Gita. So he has a very profound understanding. And since he has an enhanced intellectual ability, he can put everything in a very logical fashion for us to grasp and accept it. So we are fortunate to have him to share the knowledge with us. So welcome, Navneetji.
Thank you.
Navneetji,
So we
over to
start
you.
with a prayer.
Yes, sure.
Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sah Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Bhadram Karnebhih Shrunuyama Devaha Bhadram Pashyemakshabhiryajatraha Sthirairangai Stushtvagam Sastanubhihi Vyashema Devahitam Yadayuhu Swasti na Indro Vriddhashravaha Swasti na Pusha Vishwavedaha Swasti nastarksho Arishtanemihi Swasti no Brihaspati'r dadhatu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So, welcome to this session of spiritual insights on Hinduism. I will request Rajesh ji to just open the slide.
Sure. Can you see it now?
Yeah. So, Hinduism, also known as Hindu Dharma. Now, this tag of Hindu or Hinduism was given by Westerners, and because of that, many a times people used to, or people are even now, translating the word religion or the dharma as religion. Although the word dharma doesn't mean religion only, it is a very broad meaning word, and we will deal with that later on. In fact, till the late 19th century or the earlier 20th century, when the Britishers were conducting census and depicting the religion or the faith a person is following, so they would go to house and ask their religion. And many people will not know what their religion is. Somebody will say, I am a Vaishya. Somebody will say, I am a Brahmin. Somebody will say, I am a Jaina, the Sanatana Dharmi, whatever. And then they would club many of them together under the tag of Hindu or Hinduism. And that's how the word Hindu or Hinduism became popular. And there are a lot of things to be understood. The thing is, the vocabulary was given by the British, and maybe not only British, there were people of other religions too. And we had, I mean, in a way, we didn't have a better word to define ourselves under one umbrella, and so Hinduism, that word was accepted. Then once that word was accepted, do you know what happened? Hinduism word started getting equated with the other religions, which are Abrahamic in nature. And then that equating them, that created a lot of confusion. And then the word God came. So then the whole problem started. Really speaking, the word God is not a translation of what we accept as Ishvara, the Almighty. But then we started equating both the words and creating all kinds of confusion. We will see that later as we proceed today itself. So just as you cannot translate dosa or idli, if you try to translate, you will create confusion. Let the word dosa or idli or even chapati be as it is. Chapati is not equal to bread. If you start translating, it creates problem. So similarly, dharma should not, that word dharma should not be translated as such. Even the word God should not be translated. And many such words should not be translated. Otherwise, they lose their original meaning and they start getting tagged with some other connotation, some other meaning. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so before we proceed, how many of us have come across the following questions from adults as well as the kids? The first commonly asked question is, why there are so many gods in Hinduism? Okay. Now, the first thing is the problem arises because there are many devatas, and then the devatas they first translated into gods, and then there are problems. So there are many gods in Hinduism, and sometimes we have no answers. Yes, there are many gods. We have many gods. Really speaking, we don't have. First of all, we don't have gods. There is one Ishvara, and there are not many Ishvara. And devatas are Ishvara, and they are in a different way not Ishvara. That also we will discuss. Then, where do all these gods reside? Don't they fight among themselves? Why our temples are so dirty? What is the dress code of Hindus, and why? And one of the reasons why our temples are a bit dirty, because possibly we are the few ones in this world who use water, milk, etc. profusely inside the temple. And just like in a kitchen, when we, different from a pantry, okay? If a full-fledged kitchen with all liquid and all being used, there will be spillovers and there will be chances of it getting dirty. Of course, one has to clean it, but then that is not being done. Then why we have to bathe in the morning? This was one of the questions asked by one of the child of an NRI, and he had no answer, because the child said that my friends and all, they come to school early in the morning and they don't have bath, not all of them, and they just change, freshen up, and after going back from school to home, once they reach home, then they have a bath. Sometimes some of them have in the evening after a play. So why do you insist that I should bathe in the morning and then go to school? Then why do we have puja rituals? Why not just prayers? So this is another question. Why do we fast? Why so much of fasting is there in Hinduism? Then the most scary question is, which scripture do we follow? Now this we have a series of scriptures, so we don't have one assigned scripture. So this is another problem we face. Then there's an error here. It's not we are. It's were Rama and Krishna gods? Were they real? Did they live on earth? Or are they mythical figures? Because this word myth, Dr. Papaneja might be knowing one lady in the US, Avani Taylor. Do you know her, Dr. Papaneja? She was our batchmate. And she told me that, Navneetji, be careful with your words, because the word myth, mythical, none of the faiths or religions in the West, they use for their own. It is mostly being used for the Hindus. The myths, mythical, and Krishna, Rama, Ramayana, Mahabharata, they become mythical stories. So they coined the words and then they put it on us, and then they are using. Because she had done her PhD on one of these topics, and in her dissertation she brought out how words are imposed cleverly, and then the whole meaning is lost. And I'll show you a very pertinent clip of video just in the next 1 or 2 slides, and there we will discuss this point again. Then why do so many Hindus have preference for vegetarianism? Why don't they eat beef? So this is another question from one of the child of an NRI. And even in India, these questions are now being asked. Next slide, please. And many times we don't have answer, because all these questions require a whole frame of teaching, understanding, before you can answer it in a comprehensive way. So Rajeshji, can you please show that video clip? It's I think a 3-minute clip. Okay, yeah. I picked it up from the internet, and it is very relevant. So I thought it should be shared with the viewers. Just pause. This is one Palki Sharma Upadhyay. She is one of the journalists, and I liked what she said. It was a 8-minute video, and I just removed the relevant part and brought it out here. Please, Rajesh.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've said this in the past, and I say it again, and I believe this. that our world today is a grand storytelling competition. We are all striving to present our national, cultural, personal, all kinds of stories in the most persuasive manner. I remember reading somewhere in the olden times, they used to say that if you want to poison a people, you should poison their wells. You know, they'll have contaminated water, they'll die. Now it is said that if you want to poison a people, you poison their stories. When you poison their stories, you contaminate their minds, and it's worse than dropping bombs, because then you take away the self-confidence of a country. You devastate their morale. And I think that is more damaging any day than poisoning water or poisoning wells. You make a country doubt its abilities. And we Indians have been through a very difficult phase where we were colonized, and while we achieved independence 75 years ago, I think somewhere a lot of us are still colonized in our minds. We need to come out of that. So it is important to tell stories and tell the right stories in the right manner, because stories sway people. They change the course of policies, politics, and indeed the world. And this is my favorite example from the Second World War. America had a list of cities in Japan that they wanted to bomb with the atom bomb. And on that list was the city of Kyoto. But the US then had a Secretary of War, and he decided that Kyoto should not be part of the list. We know which two cities were bombed eventually, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He removed Kyoto because this Secretary of War in America had been to Kyoto on his honeymoon, and he saw how beautiful Kyoto is and how rich it is culturally, and he believed that that culture should not be destroyed. So the story of Kyoto won, and the story of Nagasaki and Hiroshima lost, which is why it is very important to also control your story, to actively shape it. We are a land of epics like the Mahabharata and Ramayana, and yet we've allowed others to take control of our story for way too long.
Yeah, that's enough. So I hope everybody heard it. It's a short clip, but a very powerful message. Unless we know our story in our own language, not being manipulated, interfered, or contaminated by others, we won't know our story, and we won't be speaking our own story. So some other story will take over, and we are lost. And ultimately, the stories finally take shape in the form of power. In a pyramid, multiple stories, they move up, and then they take the form of the political power, and then that decides the future of a nation. So, and because of those stories, many of these questions which we discussed arise because those stories were implanted in a different way, and then we were left with no answers. Next slide, please. Yeah. So what is so special about Hinduism? Well, Hinduism or Hindu Dharma is the oldest tradition surviving on this globe, with at least 5,000 years of recorded history and indefinitely older date of origin. It's not just 5,000 years old. 5,000 years old, we have a recorded history. The unrecorded part is much, much, much older, and it's not very clear. So whereas many such old traditions like that of Egypt became extinct, Hindu Dharma continues even today in spite of military and colonial invasions. It is an ocean of knowledge. It is an ocean of knowledge system built over thousands of years, passed on from generation to generation, mostly orally. And it is the roots of India. So wouldn't you like to know about it in its traditional narrative, not narrated by somebody else? You see, you take any modern field of knowledge. I will read it out from a book. Just a second. Yeah. Let it be medical science, mathematics, astrology, astronomy, architecture, civil engineering, metallurgy, dance, drama, music, literature, logic, jurisprudence, political science, warfare, linguistics, any field you take. In every field, our ancestors were ahead of their contemporary. See, even an old company with a continuity of management team for more than 50 years has a higher brand value and credibility. For example, in India, we have this brand called Philips. I'm sure there also you people must be aware of this Philips brand. Philips is almost 150 to 100 years, 150 years, I think surely 150 years old or maybe more. So Philips is a brand. See, even this Nokia became a brand. Can you imagine? Nokia came with those 2G phones and then it abruptly went away from the market. But because the impact it left on the users of those 2G phones, now they have come back with 4G phones, and maybe later on they may make 5G sets also. So brand also, when there is a continuity of a brand, there is a credibility. So even a 50-year-old company, even a 100-year-old company, if there is a continuity of that company, there is a credibility. Then what to talk of Hinduism, which survived various onslaughts of time, including natural calamities and human invasions, and yet it survived. You see, just because it survived, all this itself adds to its credibility. Okay, so now let us go into the core of Hinduism. And next slide, please. Yeah. Now, this is the core of Hinduism. There are some certain things in this chart I picked up from the internet. That way, everything is fine. But in certain areas, I would like it to be placed differently. Okay, that I will mention. Items are listed properly, except one or two small errors. But otherwise, this chart is quite fine. So this comprises the Hindu scriptures. When somebody says, which scripture do you follow? So we have this whole list of scriptures. Okay, and it's so comprehensive. You see, it is like this. In recently, I delivered one talk on a webinar. There I brought it out. Hinduism is like a university, whereas other religions are like schools and colleges. Okay, now the common thing between them is what? All of them are educational institutions. Only that is the common thing. But can you really compare an university with a college or a school? University has multiple faculties, multiple streams, a lot of flexibility, different courses, different types of students. So it's a very broad thing. Now, college will have one or two or maximum 3 streams in India, like art, science, commerce. This is how we see it here in India. And schools will have only one type of curriculum. And so they have one set procedure, and fixed goals, fixed set of books. Everybody follows the same thing, and they are a cohesive unit. Whereas in university, the timings may vary, the subjects are different, the textbooks are different, everything is different. So now if you start comparing both of them, there will be problems. You cannot compare a university with a college or with a school, except that both are the institution of knowledge, of education. Similarly, when we start comparing Hinduism with other religions, this problem starts. All those questions which we faced: how many gods are there? Why so many gods? Which scriptures do you follow? What scripture you are saying? Even if you utter the word Bhagavad Gita, for example, if I say, okay, I follow Bhagavad Gita, if somebody asks me, okay, where can I purchase a Bhagavad Gita? Now I have it's a very difficult question for me, because so many versions of Bhagavad Gita are available and each one is authentic in itself. So we have such a wide canvas that our answers cannot be so limited or one pinpointed answers. Whereas others will have a very, very simple thing. They have one scripture, and you cannot have multiple translations. Even the translations are controlled. Everything is controlled. It's all standardized, uniform, and it's done. And forget about the uniformity and standardization. Even in some of them, even the discussions are not allowed, that you can debate upon it and all. Whereas we are open to debates. We are open to discussions. We understand through discussions. Whereas they understand through sermons. So that is the basic difference. So that is why they are so standardized. And being standardized has its own advantage. They are more cohesive, more together, more disciplined. Here we are just all over, because our things are so wide. So here the scriptures are divided into two parts: the Shruti and the Smriti. Shruti means that which was not created by somebody, it was just heard or got from the Almighty. Smriti is something which has authorship. A person or a group of persons created it. Okay, so this is how these two differentiation is there. Now here in this chart, right hand side bottom and right hand side, Upaveda, Vedangas and Agamas. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Now these three they have kept under Smriti. Whereas in many other places, they keep it under Shruti. And in some places, I prefer somewhere in between, because they have some influence of authorship, and yet a large part of it remains without authorship, means it is just heard from the Almighty. So this is one of the differences which I would like to point out. Otherwise, this chart is quite comprehensive. Then the other thing is they have under darshanas, they have put Nyaya and Mimamsa under darshana and under Smriti. Now this Nyaya and Mimamsa also comes somewhere between Shruti and Smriti, not exactly Smriti. But rest of all, whatever they have mentioned is quite all right. And in the Upavedas, they have added this Thapat Arthashastra. Now, Arthashastra doesn't separately, is not an Upaveda. It is part of this Dhanur Veda. Some portion of it is part of Dhanur Veda and some portion comes under Sthapatya Veda. So it is not a separate Veda. So Upavedas are only 4. They have mentioned 5 of them. So rest all is, this chart is quite comprehensive and quite detailed. Okay. And we have to understand one more thing. Generally people think, oh, you are a Hindu. Okay. So what do you know about Hinduism? Yes, we have 4 Vedas, and they will quote the name of the 4 Vedas and they think it's all done. Well, firstly, the Vedas are only one. Okay. They were classified into 4 after Veda Vyasa. Veda Vyasa was the author of the Mahabharata. Okay. And Vedas were like a huge bunch of mantras, and he classified them under 4 categories. It is like science. Now, how many sciences are there? In a way, only one science. And when you start classifying them, then there may be hundreds of sciences. Okay, because you can always classify subject-wise. Similarly, Vedas are only one, but then they were classified into 4: the Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Yajur Veda, Atharva Veda. Then again there is a problem, because they are bent upon those linguists and historians to fix a date on them, so that, because they can't tolerate that these things are from the beginning of the creation, because that makes them uncomfortable. Okay, so then they want to date it. They will fix up a date with either no proof or illogical proof, and then they say the Rig Veda is the oldest, then came the Sama Veda, then came the Yajur Veda, then came Atharva Veda. Then came means, how did it come? It was already there. It was the Veda Vyasa who classified them into 4. And Veda Vyasa himself is part of a recorded history almost 5,000 years back. So if he classified, the person who is classifying them, compiling them and classifying them, himself is 5,000 years old, how much old is the Vedas then? They were existing much before that. But then, you see, when you keep repeating a story again and again, and nobody challenges it, that story becomes the truth. And that's how it happened with the Vedas. Rig Veda is the oldest, and we proudly say all this, and people talk in front of me. Sometimes, like when they introduce me, then they have to deliver a 5-minute talk before me. They will say something which irritates me, and then I lose the whole joy of delivering my rest of the talk. Because how can I feel like rudely telling, stop it, please don't say this. But if I do that in a whole group of audience in a big hall, it doesn't look nice. But then people do it. So then I have to answer them. So these are not oldest. These are all silly concepts. Okay. And do you know how these concepts they created? I'll give you one example. The example is, in one of the Vedas, I think the Rig Veda, there is a mention of a particular nakshatra. I think the Kritika nakshatra or something. Okay, the Kritika nakshatra in the month of in the zenith, in the month of I think Acharya or something. Now, this combination happens every 4,000 years. Okay, and there were some other planetary combinations. So that is mentioned. Because that is mentioned in that Rig Veda, they said this happens every 4,000 years. So this Veda is 4,000 years old. Now, how silly is this argument? if something happens every 4,000 years, it can be even 1 lakh year old, because 25 times it will repeat, isn't it? Every 4 years, this same combination happens. But instead of saying it is at least 4,000 years old, they made it is 4,000 years old. So this is how they start doing the dating. So anyway, we'll get into that more later. I think there is one more slide. Just check. Yeah. We'll quickly go through this and then we will come back maybe in the next class. Then there are 18 Vidyasthanas, the 4 Vedas, the 4 Upavedas, the 6 Vedangas, Puranas and Itihasas, Dharma Shastras, Nyaya and Mimamsa. This group comprises of is the whole body of knowledge which we follow. And you know why I picked up these 18 Vidyasthanas. In some places they are saying 14, but I prefer 18 because the Upavedas, they combine with the Vedas. I take them separately. Anyone who dares to interpret or translate the Vedas first should go through, and all these 18 Vidyasthanas should comprehensively study them before one dares to translate the Vedas. Whereas we find anybody with little knowledge of Sanskrit and a one dictionary in hand, they start translating the Vedas. It is like somebody who is good in English starts translating a book of surgery or a book of medicine. Well, you can translate partly there, but then you can commit mistakes. Some ideas must be given which has a different connotation, and you give a totally different connotation. So these 18 Vidyasthanas, generally they take almost 24 years of thorough study before one becomes one gets a comprehensive knowledge of this, and one becomes eligible to translate the Vedas. And not anyone, whoever wants, with little knowledge, tinkering with some text and then presenting a translation. That doesn't work. So these 18 Vidyasthanas, once one has a grasp over them, one has studied thoroughly, then only one becomes eligible to translate the Vedas and comment upon it. And not like you become a popular person, you start first telling the Ramayana, Mahabharata is a myth, then you start giving some meanings and translations cooked up from your own sense of creativity, and you tinker with the whole meaning. That is not acceptable. So with this, we come to an end introducing this topic. In the next class, we will take up maybe the Ramayana, the importance of Ramayana, and what we can learn from it, because I'm following a schedule which covers whatever is being taught in the level 1, 2, and 3 of the Bala Vidya classes. So those things even the parents should know in depth. So I will cover those portions, taking this chart as the base and then covering most of the things. So with this, I throw open the session for question and answers. Please.
I have a question. Can I go ahead?
Yeah, sure, please.
Are these talks recorded?
Yes, they are.
Okay. So the slides will also be available, right?
Yes, slides will be available. Of course, I may have to, once it is concluded, one set of slides is concluded, then only I'll make it available, because it's a written thing. Errors should be removed and it should be complete. But otherwise, yes, it will be available. Sure.
Okay. A couple of other questions as well, please.
Yeah.
Is it Adharva Veda or Adharvana Veda? I've heard
No, it is Atharva Veda.
Atharva Veda, right? Okay. And where does Sutrani fall under that chart? I did not see.
Where in the chart, where is the Sutrani?
I
Which
didn't
sutra?
see. So what does Sutra mean, or Sutra? Does that fall in the?
Sutra actually is a common term. Sutra means, literally it means a thread. But sutra, when it is being used in the connotation of the scriptures, it generally means a formula or a shortened form, something which is concise. In briefly, it is mentioned. Okay, so sutra can be of any type. There may be sutras, the Brahma Sutras, which are part of the Vedanta Shastra. There can be Agama Sutras. There can be even Mimamsa Sutras. So Sutra is a general term. It can be used in different places. Sutra is not a separate thing as such. It's just like a word formula. Formula need not be just algebraic formula. It can be even trigonometric. It can be some other formula.
Thank you. Thank you, and look forward to your classes.
Sure. Any other question, please? Okay. So we stop here. We end with the prayer.
Sure.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Thank you all, and wish you a happy Deepavali next weekend.
And we'll continue class next weekend too, please.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.